On January 22nd, 1692, according to Tituba's later testimony, the devil tried to make her sign his book in blood, but Samuel Parris called her into another room before she could. When people think of witch trials, they often think of Salem, which of course fascinates us too. This is a show about Salem after all. However, before and after Salem, many other witch trials occurred in North America. Witch hunting in the mid 17th century was a connected phenomenon across the English Atlantic, driven by the transmission of news, books, and legal methods between England and her colonies, and also between Spain and her colonies. Welcome to Salem Witch Trials Daily for January 22nd, 2026. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
Hi, I'm Sarah Jack. Yesterday we explored England and New England. Today we're going to look at witch trials in North America outside of New England.
New York saw no executions for witchcraft under colonial authority, reflecting Dutch legal skepticism applied in North America from 1614 to 1674. However, French Jesuit missionaries René Goupil in 1642 and Isaac Jogues in 1646 were killed by Native Americans who blamed them for disease outbreaks and are now memorialized at the Shrine of Our Lady of Martyrs in Auriesville.
Elizabeth Garlick of East Hampton was indicted in 1658, but neither convicted nor acquitted under Magistrate John Winthrop Jr., and she reportedly lived to be about 100 years old. Also, Ralph and Mary Hall of Setauket were charged on October 2nd, 1665, with murdering George Wood and infant Anne Rogers by witchcraft. They were acquitted, but Mary remained under suspicion and had to make additional court appearances so the colony could keep tabs on her. They did this to Elizabeth Garlick also.
In addition to these court cases, New York hosted many of the accused who had escaped from both Massachusetts and Connecticut witch trials, while others fled to Rhode Island, which had no witch trials whatsoever.
Moving over to Pennsylvania, in February of 1684, Swedish colonists Margaret Matson and Jethro Hendrickson were tried for witchcraft under Pennsylvania's provincial council, with English and Dutch witnesses accusing them of maleficium, including harming cattle. They had already been rumored to have been witches for about 20 years.
The jury found Matson guilty only of having the reputation of a witch, but not guilty in manner and form of actual witchcraft. And both women were released to their families. The case demonstrates how long-standing community tensions and cross-cultural conflicts fueled witch accusations in colonial America.
Maryland's witchcraft persecutions were far fewer than New England's, influenced by the Catholic Calvert family's proprietorship, but included vigilante executions at sea and formal trials on land.
In 1654, Mary Lee was hanged by sailors aboard the ship the Charity of London, who blamed her for storms, while Rebecca Fowler became the only person judicially executed for witchcraft in Maryland in 1685. And Maud Dyer died in exile after being driven from her St. Mary's County home. Stories like hers later inspired the Blair Witch Project.
There's a local effort working to exonerate these Maryland victims.
Virginia's witchcraft prosecutions began in 1626 with Joan Wright, making them the first in what would become the United States, over 20 years before Connecticut's execution of Alice Young. Unlike Puritan New England's focus on satanic conspiracy, Virginia treated witchcraft as maleficium, harmful magic like cursing crops, with accusations typically handled as slander suits, where the accused sued neighbors to restore their reputation rather than face state prosecution.
Grace Sherwood, the Witch of Pengo, became Virginia's most famous case when she was accused in 1705 of bewitching Elizabeth Hill in Princess Anne County. She was the only woman ducked to test for witchcraft in Virginia at what's now Witch Duck Point in Virginia Beach, where she floated contrary to nature and was jailed to await future trial, though no evidence exists of formal conviction, and she survived.
William Harding was the only person definitively convicted of witchcraft by a Virginia court in Northumberland County. He received whipping and banishment rather than execution.
Legal proceedings recording witchcraft in colonial New Mexico were adjudicated by both the Inquisition and civil authorities, beginning with the 1626 case involving two Indigenous women accused of murder via sorcery that was investigated and eventually dismissed in 1631 due to official skepticism.
Later litigation, such as the 1708 trial concerning a bewitched Spanish woman and the 1733 prosecution of Melchor Trujillo, often descended into a legal morass where judges struggled to distinguish victims from perpetrators because the accusers had frequently solicited the accused for magical services.
These trials relied heavily on depositions, confessions, and physical evidences like dolls, beads, and rocks, culminating in a significant judicial outbreak in Abiquiu between 1756 and 1763, where 176 people were accused.
Unlike the witch hunts seen in Europe, 16th century Mexico experienced no mass executions for witchcraft, as the centralized Mexican Inquisition largely viewed such accusations as superstition rather than heresy and did not burn witches.
A distinct feature of these trials, as detailed in Martin Nesvig's The Women Who Threw Corn, an episode of ours that you should check out, was the adoption of indigenous magical practices by non-native women, including the divination ritual of throwing corn and the use of native hallucinogens like peyote and psilocybin mushrooms to predict the future.
Prosecutions typically targeted vulnerable demographics such as widows, single women, and those of mixed ethnicity, who were often accused of using practical magic for ends like love spells or influencing slave owners to grant manumission.
In early 1651, news reached New England colonies that a witch hunt was also occurring in Bermuda. This news arrived precisely as tensions were peaking in Springfield, Massachusetts, during the accusations against Hugh and Mary Parsons, reinforcing the colonists' belief that they were part of a global battle against the devil and that the mood that made witchcraft plausible had settled over the colonies. Between 1651 and 1655, 12 people were tried for witchcraft, 10 women and 2 men. 5 were executed, 4 women and 1 man in Bermuda.
These cases, ranging from New York to New Mexico, remind us that witch hunting was a connected phenomenon across the colonies, driven by the transmission of news and legal methods.
While the Salem trials often capture our focus, the mood that made witchcraft plausible extended far beyond New England, reaching places like Bermuda and the Spanish territories. Join us tomorrow for our next episode where we'll discuss familiars in the Salem Witch Trials.